everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Impctrs Out Loud with me, your host, Tracy V. Allen. And today I have with me Douglas Katz, and he is here to talk about an innovative product that he created to help persons with disabilities, to navigate a certain product. I'll let him tell you about it, but to navigate a certain product really, really, really well. So I'm going to give you a little backstory about Douglas, and then we're going to let him take it from there. So Douglas is a seasoned professional with a rich blend of military and civilian experience. As a U.S. Army officer in field artillery, he served in pivotal roles such as counter fire officer, intelligence officer, and platoon leader. Transitioning to civilian life, Doug excelled in marketing and sales and operations management across diverse sectors, including telecommunications and mortgage lending, while also leading his own business ventures. He holds a bachelor's degree in management from West Point and an MBA from Loyola University in Chicago. Outside of his career, Douglas is a dedicated martial artist with a second degree black belt in Aikido, an avid cook, and skilled knife maker. His community involvement includes leadership roles in veteran organizations and local commerce boards. All right, Doug, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. All right, so let's start off with what is your cause tale? Why are you tell us about what you're doing, why you're here on this podcast today, and what led you to this.
Great. It's a really interesting tale. I was actually at an event last night, a founders event, and I was talking to this guy who's from another country, and he's like, wow, it sounds like a Hollywood movie, because I've really built this amazing team around what I'm doing. And I'm a disabled vet, and there's a lot of us out there, more so Army, Marines, guys who are ground pounders, as we call them. But I have my share of issues, and had picked up knife making as a hobby when I moved to where I live now, because we moved about 4 years ago, and was having some upper extremity issues at a particular time. And I could have sat down and binge watched TV or something, but I said, I'm gonna come up with something that can allow me. You really hit it on the head with all my hobbies, because I wanted to still be able to cook. So I said, why are knives the way they are? I was kind of thinking to myself, and I looked, and I have scrap stuff all over I should have done this in my shop. I have scrap stuff all over my shop, and there was a circular saw blade that really kind of caught my eye, because I wasn't going to have to swing a hammer. I could do some stuff, but I was having those issues. And there's a knife that I was aware of called the Ulu, which is an Inuit knife. It's a knife. It was called the everything knife. And oddly enough, well, not oddly enough, it was a woman's knife, because men would hunt, women would cut hair and dress game and build igloos. So it was a very versatile knife. And there were components of that I liked. And then there was components of normal knife use that I liked. But a normal knife, the geometry of it is such that, because it's straight and linear, it causes issues to the upper arm, right? All the forces are perpendicular. You almost have to have a saw cut. My martial arts skills really drew me to effective force transfer, right? Like when you're doing any martial art, if there's striking involved or boxing or anything, force transfer, efficiency of force transfer is a big thing. So we developed what we call the Nulu, and it stands for New Ulu. And my cause tale became it being about independence, right? So, I have permanent disabilities. I have some that are more, they sort of phase in and out.
Right.
And I realized that when I was injured, I don't cook. And that has a very, very large impact. It's a small thing that has a large impact. People don't really think about it. And the inertia right now is about preparing your own food as much as you can, getting away from processed foods. And the problem is that's great, but it leaves out a large population. And we also then started to look at convergence of symptom characteristics across different disabilities, right? With disability, and I'm new kind of to being active in the environment because I was a spectator.
Okay.
And it seems to me that disability is a classification, not something to design around. People say you're disabled or you're not disabled.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me thinking that we can design better products across an array of different people who are categorized as disabilities to include temporary disabilities. I just had my entire shoulder rebuilt, my primary
Mm-hmm.
shoulder. I'm still not fully healed. That's 18 months later. For the first couple of months, if not further, you are disabled.
All right.
So part of our cause is kind of changing the narrative to say you're somewhere on a spectrum of ability. You're not disabled. So that's kind of our cause, is to say there's a bigger market than people think, because it doesn't draw a lot of development. If you look at the ergonomic stuff out there, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say it's all terrible. There are some innovative.
Some of it.
It's pretty bad, right? And
Yeah.
it's this mishmash of what disabled people come up with PVC and pool noodles and all kinds of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or something that looks it lacks nice design, right?
Right.
It look like something you want to pick up. So we're trying to do is bring all that together. This actually is an earlier prototype. Our current prototype's further along, but what I said was, you really should be able to use a knife in a way that
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't have to change to use a tool. That doesn't make sense. A tool is about making your life easier. So what we
Mm-hmm.
have done, and it's kind of hard, it's like a small area, and I'm not going to be doing a demo, but what we've done is we've sort of taken the extended cutting edge of a normal knife and created a mechanism where this is the primary grip, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can cut this way, you can chop, you can slice this way. I'm like working in the small area. You can chop
Mm-hmm.
this way, but if you look, the geometry is radii along an arc where your hand is a circle. So the force transfer is dynamic. You would use this different than I would, but you would use it in a way that works with you. On a normal knife, there's really one use capability. In some other knives, there's a few others, but this gets better. If you turn it around, you can cleave, precision cut, and do other things. So this is customized use, which is really lacking in the disabled community, right? Someone will say, I'm going to make an ergonomic knife,
Uh-huh.
an adaptive knife. And it's like, here's what a normal knife looks like, and we're going to put a different handle on it. And a funny story is, we created this. It just worked. And then we stopped and said, yeah, we're talking to a lot of, we're trying to talk to a lot of investors. We're talking to a lot of different groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it just works isn't a great explanation. So we actually invented it, deconstructed it completely, and
Uh-huh.
then constructed it with what we had learned about cutting dynamics and geometry and all that kind of stuff. And that's really gotten us to where we are. We're currently also doing something that I hadn't really thought about before. We're engaged with organizations whose charter it is to create awareness and help the individuals we're trying to help. We don't want to do the heavy lifting. What my team and I are all good at is a great product to solve
Products.
There's a problem that we have a personal connection to, but there's people who are far better, who have budgets and everything to create awareness. So we're
Right.
evaluated by many of the adaptive offices around the country,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can help them do what they do better by doing what we do well. And if we can build that connection to that community,
Mm-hmm.
what becomes very interesting is it can morph. So our mantra is adaptive, assistive, adjacent. Adaptive are going to be who pick this up and say, oh, I get this.
Right.
Assistive go, wow, this makes my life better, and it could prevent carpal tunnel and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we're going to enter the big market. So I said it was really long.
So you said a lot of key points that I can relate to. So I had carpal tunnel surgery in my right hand.
Yep.
Right. I had Decker vein and carpal tunnel surgery. So at one point in time, I couldn't use my right hand. So I had to learn to write with my left hand. So I'm ambidextrous at this point. Right. But when I had the surgery, and before I had the surgery, and I can drive with one hand because I had to still get around. So I can maneuver an entire car with my left hand and not have to use my right hand if it doesn't work. But I remember during that time, I used to love to cook, and I couldn't cook because I could not hold a knife
Yep.
properly. And I mean, I could do something with my left hand, but it was more advantageous to do it. A knife like that would have been perfect at that time. And it kind of made me lose my love for cooking. So I don't cook as much anymore. And it's been years since I've had the surgery because it still hurts. Right? Certain maneuvers that I need to do with the knife, even though I've had the surgery, you know, the surgery doesn't really cure the problem, right? It's just a temporary fix and you're not in as much pain. But there are things that I can't do. Even in my home, I had to change all the locks on my door because I could not turn a knob anymore.
I get
right. So I had to get all of the pull down ones.
Yeah.
So I just needed to just do like this, and the door would open. So there, like you're right. There are a lot of permanent disabilities, and sometimes there are temporary disabilities that people are going through because they have a specific injury at that time.
And there's people like you who adapt, who just say, "Okay, I'll deal with it."
Right.
And there really isn't a targeted thing. You mentioned some really interesting things, and part of the design that we did with this is to say the handle should just be a connection point. Now, if you're using a regular knife, and I'm going to use this to illustrate it, you have to grip this.
Yes.
Well, what's a really interesting thing is gripping something actually reduces, I keep losing the thing, reduces your arm strength. Because tendons are sub. So you've got tendons here that run all the way along your arm.
Right.
That's what real strength is. But when you said using a knife properly, what's really interesting is I've been talking to a lot of chefs as we've designed this. And this is dangerous. This is not real sharp right now. I have to resharpen it so I can show you. But a real chef, let's say this was the back of a blade. They pull the blade, not the handle. So the handle would be out here. They pull the blade and they cut that way. So the actual correct way to hold a knife with a trained chef is not even using the handle. So we looked at it and we said, that is equally ridiculous, if not more so. And they said the handle is for balance. So what happens is on a normal knife, you're holding the blade like this, chopping. The handle is out there now to provide weight because you're holding the blade. So you now have a handle that actually serves no use.
No purpose.
I love a knife. Don't get me wrong, because I'm not trashing normal knives. Normal knife is a great multitasker. So if you're an outdoor person and you go out in, you do field craft, you need a knife with a point because you'd be doing something that requires more of that motion. In the kitchen, I would challenge somebody to show me on a regular basis a stabbing motion. You just don't do it. So that's why we actually have also removed the point to make it safer. But what you're talking about is exactly what we're looking for. We're trying to get people out of sort of that, hey, I just deal with it. It's just something to deal with. And by creating, we're kind of calling like a universal scale and a universal method of evaluation. What we're hoping to be able to do is bring to investors and other people who would be interested to say there's a lot of people like you who are saying, I would buy that, but they have no mechanism to actively say, hey, we need something better to do this. So for us, big component of our go-to-market, one where we have a Kickstarter in October, and we're going to be very, 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 very driven to get the people who benefit out there, like get it in those communities. And we're starting to make great connections in those communities. But as we get awareness out there, more people can say, hey, this is good. I hate to say it, from my business side, I say, I don't want competition. The best thing that we can do is draw competition to a need where we can look and say, wow, there is a market here. And I think there's some unique opportunities. I think there's opportunities in outspoken celebrities, even celebrity chefs who are talking about adapting and keeping their life, So there's a connection between you and them, and they have the power to bring it out there. Being a disabled veteran, there's a huge focus on disabled veterans. And the ability to get people excited in a project just because there's something that for them virtue signals not only helping someone who is disabled, but a patriotic aspect. So for us, what we're trying to do is create the right go-to-market where we can stitch together a network of all the people who actually have really, really similar goals and objectives and vision and mission, but just aren't working together. And I don't care if they work together, but what I can do is use that as what we used to call in the Army a battlefield multiplier. Like, it's fine who does it. I'm 53. I am not going to be able to build the relationships or anything that I need to do between now and bringing this to market. It's just going to be a very, very difficult task. There's people who've worked in this field forever who know this, right? And we also have, a physical therapist on part of our team, right? So we can bring some of what we did and bring science into it, but also her network are other physical therapists. We need people like that to say, hey, guess what? You just had carpal tunnel surgery. We recommend use of this. And not even necessarily financially benefiting them, because then there's an issue with, are they doing it for that reason? But therapists, all the orthos, everyone I met are very focused on their patients, their clients, and what they want to do is give them the best quality of life.
The best, right. So you said a few things that I want to piggyback on. So one of the things that you said, not directly, but indirectly, is doing what you're good at and knowing what you're not good at and what you should outsource to someone else. So you talked about the fact that you're good at the innovation of making the knife, looking at the ergonomics of it and how it should work. And then you're outsourcing your marketing. You're building some relationships, but you're leveraging those relationships that you're building for them to build more relationships that lead back to the sales and promotion of your product. How did you come about? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators struggle with that component. Yes. They want to be everything in the business to the business,
right?
Not realizing that they cannot. Burnout happens, right? And frustration happens because you're trying to work in a lane that you are not the best at.
Yes.
So tell me how you came about that.
We have a marketing team. So I do have a marketing team that is really focused on branding, design, making sure that we look professional. But it's more that connection of, okay, how are we going to get there, right? You could either pay per click or you could do all that. And what we've really figured out is this is an involved, vocal group. And I say group, again, I'm sort of like mishmashing it all together, right? I'm combining it when it shouldn't be combined. I mean, I guess the best example would be is if you're a marketer and you're like, I'm going to market to the Asian community. And it's like, that's not a community, right? There's South Asian, there's all these different communities that have very, very different heritage, dietary, but it's all in Asia. So we're going to market to Asia.
Right.
Disabled is the same thing. It's this really, really monolithic category. And so what we're trying to do is be able to not change our business plan, not change our business model, not change our value proposition, but bring it and be able to say, hey, Parkinson's group, you have a need for this. And we don't want to minimize that, but help us get this out there. And then Down syndrome is a very different one. Our value proposition to the Downs community is less retaining independence and being able to cook for yourself. It's gaining independence.
Yes.
One of the interesting things is you look at the Down, cerebral palsy, some of the other communities where there's been a high degree of increased visibility. Well, with that increased acceptance, there's also better treatment. People are living longer. Kids with Down syndrome are able to fulfill pretty normal.
Live independently too.
Into their 50s. It used to be their 30s.
Right.
Well, they suffer from decreased grip strength from the beginning, right? So our model is interesting because we also look at the children's market as having some of the same range of challenges, right? So in our model, we look at really somebody who is in their sort of late teens to late 20s as sort of the benchmark, right? They may have issues, but their physicality can overcome those. And it's a downward slide for them, for anybody. Like, I consider myself in pretty good shape for 53. I played in my 40s. I still work out regularly, adaptively around any issues I have. I've got a lot of lower body issues. But, there's that sort of that whole piece out there. So we look at it as this continuum. So if you look at kids, it's the same issue. right? And Down's kids being a subset of that. But you can look and say, okay, if we can integrate something like this into the right place where it's safe, then all of a sudden you're maybe engaging them on food prep earlier because this is safer than a normal knife. You may have to use something that doesn't necessarily accomplish the task as well. But now let's say if you can move that, shift that a little earlier with any kids, to include Down kids. Now they're engaged with their diet sooner. So that's a bigger market that isn't disabled. It's that adjacent market, right? Adaptive, assistive, adjacent. So for Down kids, where we're looking to get into those communities is, and parents are great in those communities. Like they're very, very active. And we've had,
they are.
We were not even thinking about that community until I went to an event. I had on me because I like to make sure people see the knife. And this woman, this would be great. We would love to talk. Well, I envision maybe you find a cooking school that would like to increase their serviceable market, but also get good PR. And then we have very, very involved Downs parents who look and say, I want what's best for my kid. And then we have, so I think what it's going to be is the success of this is going to be a lot of grassroots, right? It's almost like when you hear about when they're talking about elections. This is an Amazon product, right? I mean, it could sell on Amazon, but you could tell there's a use case. There's something people have to know. So our marketing is going to be events, getting there where people can feel it. And then that, I hate to use viral because it's so played out there, but then that word of mouth of this works. And even if there's a little bit of a premium price, because it replaces so much and has a use case, the premium price for us is it's expensive to produce. There's some components of it, but it's not going to be out of the range, right?
What would the price be?
Right now, we're still working on retail price, and I'm not being evasive. We actually got really lucky. One of my business partners, who now is getting more and more involved, is a 35-year veteran in the knife industry. So we're working in one direction. He came out and said, my guys can do it for about a third. So we're still trying to figure out fully that pricing strategy. We'll know a lot after our Kickstarter. The beautiful part about impact, I'll call it, impact commerce or impact capitalism, is a lot of the money out there right now in investing is in technology, right? I go to events and I'm like, yesterday I went to a founders event. And I heard from like 4 people like, wow, it's really rare to hear somebody making something. And I'm like, okay, well, I get it, right? That tracks. But, if we can find the impact investors, right? So if we can find people who, let's say a family office, right? And a family office, a private office that runs a ultra high net worth family's wealth. Those are businesses, right? They do philanthropy, they do investing, financial management. We're out there looking for the unicorn because for us, the unicorn is a family office that's an investor, but also has their foot in philanthropic endeavors in maybe one of the communities we're looking at. So maybe there's a family member in that family office who had Parkinson's. And saw the decline and they're like, oh, well, wait a minute. We're already donating to maybe a Parkinson's-based charity, but we can invest in this company, help bring this to market, maybe have an ability to stitch that together where we know people in a foundation and we know people with the knife. So we're looking for those people who can jump on and do it. It's a little harder, right? It's that unicorn thing where, I was talking to a VC yesterday and he's like, wow, that's really hard to find. But what I said was it is, however, it would be difficult if I was saying I'm just trying to find someone who is connected to Parkinson's. The same way our model allows us to stack ailments and characteristics of disability onto multiple issues and create a market where some says, well, wait a minute, I didn't look at it that way. If now you're taking a symptom that this solves and running it across all these different things, you create a serviceable market that's investable. What we're hoping is because of that in the opposite, right? If you look and say, here's the combined market, but now if you blow it out and you say, hey, that covers Parkinson, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, Down syndrome, spinal injuries. Now you take
Right.
a group.
But what I hear you saying is that you're niching down,
Mhm.
right, to specific markets, and you're niching your messaging to those specific markets.
Exactly.
So you're not having one broad statement like, "Oh, this is great for persons with
Exactly.
disabilities." You're saying, "Hey, if you have carpal tunnel, this knife is great
Yep.
for you because it can help to alleviate
Yes.
XYZ, and this is how you would use it. If
Yes.
you have Down syndrome, hey, this is a great knife for you to get for your young kids because it gives them autonomy over some of their food prep and what they eat
Yes.
and how they can eat it."
Yes.
So that messaging, narrowing down that messaging
Yes.
for the specific demographic becomes important in
And it
selling
works
the
on the
knife.
investment side too, right? Like
Right,
ultimately,
exactly.
if
Yes.
and we feel that we should be able to maybe access some grant money, right? So for us,
Hmm.
we're really unique. It's harder for us to find money, but we're probably not going to be fighting over the same money, which
Right.
is actually really cool. And you brought up something that I don't want to lose
Hmm.
is when we were coming up with our business plan, and I went through a great accelerator. And I would say, especially for people who want to do something like an impact approach,
Hmm.
find an accelerator as maybe one that can eat that even
Yes.
that are free for like military
Hmm.
or you can find ways to go through. But it really helped me, you know, refine some of the things that we're going after. And the way that we want to go after it, right? Like
Hmm.
ultimately, everybody sort of sends you down the traditional road. And what I found is we're kind of writing the book on some of the thought leadership of this. And that's what's really kind of cool. Now, part of it when we created it, and this is what drew people in, and that's what kind of took me down that side road, I'm sorry,
Hmm.
is an aspect of circular development. So this again, this isn't even our current prototype.
Hmm.
Our current prototype is like right before production. We're going to market in October, but we have learned things from these adaptive offices. We fully intend to create a cycle of development. We don't just want feedback to say, I love this knife. We want people to be brutal to tell us, how can I make it better? So,
Better.
your situation, I would, when you said I can't grip things. So the
Hmm.
question becomes not how do we make this better so that you can grip onto it, right? The question,
Hmm.
how do we make you not drop it? Because what we're trying to do is create the handle, not being
Hmm.
something you put the death grip on. Like maybe you could even hold it very loosely, or
Right.
maybe there's a way to make it so that you don't drop it.
Hmm.
And that becomes our development cycle because we know that there's people out there who are saying, hey, I would buy another, like I bought it and I'll buy another one if
Hmm.
you can create a handle that does this. And then
Right.
really become, and we're hoping that really dissuades competition to some,
Hmm.
or gives us first mover because, really, it's not like tomorrow a bunch of companies are going to pick up and say, we're going to do everything that they're doing.
Hmm.
Um, our bigger aspiration, because I've built an amazing team, is actually to move into the space of what's called a venture studio. And a venture
Hmm.
studio is an organization that takes ideation and gets through the viability and takes it to market where then they're ready to move for investment. What we would like to become is, and assuming that the Nulu is successful, is take what
Hmm.
we learned, systematize it, and bring more adaptive things to market in the same manner of doing that. We hope to
Okay.
really good network of people where we can say, hey, we've come up with this really cool idea, or better yet, maybe someone in that community comes to us with an idea and we can say,
Right.
that's amazing, and systematize it to where we're like, okay, it's a great idea, does it have commercial viability, right? There
Hmm.
are, I know, nonprofits who will help um, um, manufacture or create items on a small scale. But
Yes.
if we can find those commercialized right ideas you can commercialize, where you
Hmm.
really apply an impactful capitalist thought process, right? Of saying
Hmm.
you need money, but if we can democratize the impact of this. And I once saw an interview with Samuel Jackson, and it was
Hmm.
really, because that guy does more movies than anybody out there. And he said, I do certain movies of
Hmm.
questionable quality, and I'm paraphrasing, so that I can work on the projects I want to work on. And what we want to do is be able to do that, to where we've got a self-sustaining business, but the R&D is really about what does this market really need? And when you think about it from the viewpoint of a capitalist or a business, well, great. Like, you would kill to have your market telling you exactly what you need, right? Like, that's a dream. So that's what I'm hoping to do. And then do a little bit more, we're bringing it all together, right? We're trying to create a common device everybody can use, but then do some disintegration of that where, and I don't mean make it to nothing, but disintegrate it to a point where maybe we're able to design a handle that's specific to the carpal tunnel market that has benefits, because that will still be a big enough market. The beauty of ours is it's kind of like, I would guess, being an undertaker, right? Like, we are really throwing around now the concept of you age into disability. And if you think, I tell my kids this, right? Because again, I'm in pretty decent shape. One of my kids discovered fitness, and now he wants to do bench press competitions. Okay. I'm able to beat him up until like a certain point. But, then my recovery is longer. And he was making fun of me, and I said, I'm 53, so you're 19. So your age, triple it, and then we can talk. But not enough discussion about aging into disability. Understanding that the more you understand adaptation to continue to do what you love, you're not selling out. You're not, like, you could look and say the knife in and of itself is adaptation. You would just be trying to cut things, you'd be ripping apart with your hands. And that kind of thinking to market then. So, and what's crazy is if you look at tech, people are all about adaptivity in tech. They're just not out doing other things. They're all tough it out, right? Like, try and get an old person to use a walker for the first time. It's tough, but you look and you say you're gonna end up in the hospital. It's really not a good way. And then accept the adaptation because the outcome is terrible. Instead of them looking at saying, wait a minute, why am I waiting until the outcome to not adapt is like peril? Like, why don't they look and say, well, you know what? I notice I'm cooking less. Why don't I get this? And we do really feel. Oh, go ahead.
So my last question to you is, have you done any formal A/B testing? And if you have, what has the outcome been? So, like, we talked about chefs, and I know that they end up with a lot of carpal tunnel syndrome and other connective tissue issues with their arms and stuff like that. Have you done that type of A/B testing, giving them?
We're bootstrapping this right now. So we created prototypes. Prototypes are out being evaluated, and we're getting feedback from, as I said, like state adaptive offices, but also individual users.
Okay.
And one of my good friends is a chef. He was one of the first people I sent it to. And we are getting great feedback. And it's what feedback we get is, and this guy, again, he was a trained chef. He was a West Point friend of mine. And he said, it took me 3 days, and I get it. Right? Okay. Like, it's sort of that you have to let go of, hey, I want to use a regular knife, which by using the wrong way in it. Right. But so we are doing a lot of testing. We think the problem right now is because we're bootstrapping, this is not manufacturing steel. So it can be made sharp, but it loses its edge pretty quick. So feedback we got is, well, it doesn't keep its edge. And we're like, we put in there because to us it was more important. Let's get as many out there as possible, and let's understand the design geometrics. So we're able to take the noise out and say, what do people really like about it? And what we're really finding is people get it. We get sort of like minor comments, but a lot of the comments are, we have to be more articulate and refined in our use, like the instructions. Okay. And interesting is, the instructions are to the point of, here's sort of the grips, but the hard part is we've been throwing around an idea of like, how do you Nulu? Because what we want is people to tell us how they use it. So the other problem is people have in their mind the right way to do things. And it took me being an entrepreneur because, I was institutionalized by corporate America. Hey, there's a right way to do things. You got to color in the lines.
Mm-hmm.
An entrepreneur, I'm like, stop coloring in the lines. So our hard part is getting people to get past. I talked to a guy last night and he goes, I like using a chef's knife because it makes me feel like a chef.
Ooh.
What I want to say is making you feel like a chef should be people saying that
Your
was
food is good.
real, right? It shouldn't be right. But there's this whole aspect of our world changing to the aesthetics, right? Like how
Yes.
online,
Yes.
right? You can tell I probably don't care that much about how I look online, but people worry about what the perception is,
Yes.
as opposed to saying how what's the outcome, and that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where we want to get to is redefine that. So I hope that answered the question. And
Yes, it does.
we're putting aside a certain number of our first run that we're ordering in October timeframe. We're putting aside those to have a pool of evaluation knives that we will
Okay.
continue to put through the market. Through its tests, and we want to continue to grow that because one thing we want to do is actually we're going to be bringing in more help, but
Mm-hmm.
who want to help, who can gain something from helping run our test program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, bootstrapping it, you need as much help as possible, but there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people out there who could really, really help with that. And the hard part is, right, as a startup, sometimes like all of a sudden we're about going to market and other stuff
Mm-hmm.
suffers a little bit. So we are bringing on more people to do that. And I would say any of your listeners out here who are in, I would love to get it out to everybody.
Right.
But anybody who are out there who are in a position to help the community that we're talking about and create
Mm-hmm.
impact, who want a test one, we will get it to you. It may take a couple of weeks. It may be one of the pre-manufacturing ones, but we'll get them one on our website.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, our website is just going up because we didn't want to expend money on that before we had to. But that'll
Mm-hmm.
be up with the Kickstarter, so it should be up soon. However, our Facebook page, all of our social media does have a QR code. They've got 3 of them. They've got a QR code where someone could request a evaluation device. We're totally on board with that. They got to fill out a quick contact form, and we can get them in the queue for that. Also,
Okay.
I'm hoping there are people out there, and we realize part of our investing strategy may be small $10,000, $15,000 investors. So
Mm-hmm.
we are looking for people who may have a desire to be part of that. We see as our target on that might be an ortho who sees the benefit. They make a lot of money. I've had a lot of
Right. Mm-hmm.
so we're looking for those kind of investors, and there's a link for any investors, and someone might know somebody who could help us.
Mm-hmm.
And then people who just want to be kept up to date on the project.
Okay.
And with that, there'll be updates of when our Kickstarter is starting. Again, we're gonna have all the bundles up there, all of that. But for that group too, if we're missing something, if there is a nonprofit that for some reason I don't know about that would some way want to work with us, a chef out there who's like, I want to be part of this. Anybody who looks and says food preparation, eating is one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You
Mm-hmm.
can't unless you eat. And there's a demoralization in losing control.
Yes.
Hey, I love DoorDash as much as the next guy.
Mm-hmm.
Doing DoorDash every day isn't you'll be on Ozempic at some point if you're doing that. So what we want to say is no, this is really about let's disrupt the cycle of degradation to the point that you lose control, because
Mm-hmm.
that, like, it sort of all leads to that, and then that impacts so many other things. And what we want to do is have people maintain control so as long as possible. We really see the gift market as being a big part of this too, because my father lived with us for a couple of years. He passed away, but he was in his late 80s. He was pretty independent. My wife's family is now very narrow, so we've got a courtside seat of aging and that. So it's become very personal to us to say that's really important to that community. And
Right.
gift giving will be a big part. Like grandma and grandpa are slowing down. They're not cooking. Get them a Nulu so that the Nulu can be their ticket to continuing to enjoy what all of us enjoy in life. So I told you again, I was a talker. So hopefully that's
So
maybe a two-parter for you. But
that's okay. It was good. So if you had to give 3 tips to anybody getting into the innovative space, whether it's some type of adaptive, well, more than likely it will be some type of adaptive process that they want to, whether they're dealing with something and they decide, hey, this is a good adaptive device to help people in this industry. What 3 tips would you give them, or thoughtful
Really valid. I think
lessons?
first thing I would say, and it's not one of the 3 tips, but find help, right? If you can get into an accelerator, get into all of it, because that will help with ideation, like it will help with everything. And it may end up a pivot. And it may not change the DNA of what you're doing, but it may be a pivot. So maybe that is the first tip. Find help, get help, and find communities that you may have a connection to, either a disadvantaged business, woman-owned business, disabled business, veteran-owned business, right? Hopefully you can find something. Go to alumni organizations. Someone may help you out. So use your affinities to find that help. And if you can get into and I say an accelerator because it's structured, right?
Right.
Secondly, be fearless. Like when I started doing this, and still, I called CEOs of other knife manufacturers who were amazingly helpful. Like a shout out to the CEO of Buck Knives, super helpful guy. A shout out to Jason Knight, who is one of the judges from the early seasons of Forge and Fire. I just called the guy up because there's other content, and he was super, super helpful. So you will find help where you least expect it. And the flip side of like reach out, be fearless, is don't sit in your idea and say someone's going to steal it. No one.
Oh yes, that's a big one.
It's a lot of effort to bring something to market. And all, you're so close to your idea, like you don't want anyone to know. And the reality is, if it's a device, yes, get your patent protection and do all that, or find out if it's patentable. But a lot of those accelerators and stuff will prevent you from spending money on that kind of stuff. And as you're reaching out, people will tell you, here's some modifications that you can make. So it's all kind of that journey. And I would, another side note, along with reaching out, anybody who's got a device, get smart on patent stuff. Don't become a patent lawyer. I belong to a company called, or a nonprofit called Impctr.org. They are very, very big in helping regain and maintain the constitutional right that is your patent protection on something. But get smart on it, because people are like, well, I have a patent, I'm great. Well, the patent might not be written right, and you may really, really be in a situation where you're exposed. So kind of do that due diligence and just talk to as many people as you can. Friends, family, experts. And if you find somebody in a market that you want to get into, talk to them. They love talking about what they're going to do, right?
Okay.
And be passionate, right? Like it's something where it's hard enough to be genuine in like a day-to-day job, right? Like I've sold mortgages for 22 years. I'm looking at it. Is it my passion? Probably not. But find what you're good at and develop a passion about it with something like this, right? So everyone's like, follow your passion. I heard a great thing the other day. It was on a podcast from Scott Galloway, and he said, find what you're good at and do that. So
you're right.
Great idea. That, in a sense, is what you're good at. Create the passion around that and bring people along for the ride. And again, don't do it yourself. Get help. So I hope that was good advice.
All right. So what makes you an innovative impactor?
An innovative impactor. I think it's just where we've chosen to plant our flag, right? Like, I think humans in general are innovators, but I think for me, it's a matter of looking at how can I help people with similar issues to me to increase their quality of life. And I think I have a friend with MS from the academy, and we've been talking about this project. And he threw out there, I love this. It was and I'm paraphrasing it, I'm going to get it wrong, but the huge impact of simple changes, right? So you see somebody who's struggling and you're like, they're like, this small thing has made a massive difference. And you look, and people are trying to invent the next. I was talking to people last night at this founders thing. They were talking about quantum computing. My head literally was like, it was beyond, like, I understood it, but it was
Right.
beyond the scope of, like, I'm like, wow, there's people really sitting there architecting quantum computers. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm making a knife. But in some ways, this can make a huge impact in the day-to-day lives of people.
Yes. Yes.
And what we want to keep is that innovation going. I mean, we even want to find potential products that didn't go to market right? Because they went to market and it was gadgety, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
as seen on TV. But then one of my friends invented this really cool thing. It's a steak rake, it's called, right? And it's got a steak, and you can, like, stick it in the ground and it stands up. And he went to market. I played rugby with him at West Point. Brilliant guy. Took it to market, sold a good number of them. But I'm like, hey, that's adaptive. And we got into this conversation of, like, well, it's cool for anybody, but going to that market first versus saying, okay, what's the market with, like, arthritic issues, right? So
Right.
we even want to find products like that we can maybe move through our system and go back and say,
Also.
that button and make these changes. So we want to continue to have this dialogue and thought leadership around
Mhm.
simple changes that people can adopt as time goes on,
Okay.
so that as the need arises, the habit's already there.
Okay.
Our world.
I don't think you ever told us what the name of your company was.
Our company is called Nulu, right? So there's the
Okay, so the whole company is called Newell, not
well,
just the knife.
my venture studio is called Red Leg Innovation. Um,
Okay.
but that's really not customer facing, right? That I'm an artillery guy. One of my disabilities is I'm practically deaf. So and that's our studio. But what people will see from us, they may never know who the background is. We're
Okay.
really all focused right now on Nulu, and
On
Nulu
Newell.
comes from
Okay.
New Ulu, right? So
Okay.
we want to pay reverence to the
The
indigenous
original.
communities that this came from, but
Mm-hmm.
it's different enough that, and it's funny, if you had talked to anyone who goes on an Alaska cruise, or as an example, they're like, oh yeah, I know what the Ulu is, because they probably went to Alaska, bought one, and it's nicely displayed, like, on their desk or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We want to pay an homage to that, in that the DNA goes back a long time, but we're the
Mm-hmm.
new guy on the block, and we're really changing how that's done. Now, our product strategy, by the way, will also be accessories, and there's a lot of other things. This will be the the T1000, right? Like, there's going to be the other Terminators coming down the pipe, and we've already got a really, really decent roadmap of equally good products that play on the same thing. And then
Awesome.
we foresee a portfolio of brands that we're bringing to market that all bring this impactful thing for everybody.
Okay. All right, Doug. Well, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
being my guest on
For
Impactors today. I learned a lot
yeah,
about knives and adaptive devices and how you come up with the thought pattern behind the ideation behind it. And I really hope that a lot of people who are listening to this, because you gave some really, really good tips about business processing,
yeah,
right? And your whole business model. And I think that if someone is getting into this industry or just getting into entrepreneurship, or you're a nonprofit, even for nonprofits or social enterprises, the tips that you dropped were amazing and can be applied to new businesses. I actually love, because I talk about all the time, that people need to find collaborators. You need to collaborate. You cannot build in a silo. It takes too long and you exhaust too many resources. If you build and leverage if you leverage your network, you can get a lot done in a quicker time and meet the audience that you're looking for at a lower cost point, right?
100%.
I also like the fact that you talked about being good at what you are good at, right? And outsourcing the rest of it. You don't have to do everything by yourself. And A/B testing. Lord, I tell people that all the time. You have to A/B test
Yeah,
your products and services to make sure that you're bringing the best product or service to the market
yeah.
for the people who are going to utilize it.
It's interesting. One other topic on that's interesting, and it's sort of a
Mhm.
sub tip, is don't let perfection. The old adage, the perfection, be extra good. I learned that in the military, right? Like when
Mm-hmm.
like you could write a great plan, the battlefield's gonna determine how that goes.
Exactly.
And I think it's, there was a point where we were like, can we test it? What are we gonna do? And we
Mm-hmm.
said, you know what? It's okay to go to market with non-production steel as long as you
Mm-hmm.
tell the tester, hey,
Mm-hmm.
including a sharpener, you may have to sharpen a couple more times, but it was important to us to get as many out there. Testers are super, super helpful, but I
Yes.
think I think people sometimes get worried they're going to hear bad news, like
Mm-hmm.
and no, but I this has been amazing. I love the chance to share the wealth, and I think if people do all these things, they get passionate. Like I was thinking as you were talking about that, like I was just working on a white paper about our model,
Mm-hmm.
right, right before this podcast, and I
Mm-hmm.
was loving it. Like I was like, wow, this is great. And I'm like, okay, something is either really wrong or really right. Where I'm enjoying writing a white paper, but if you can get to that, then I think, and again, there may be other entrepreneurial things people go
Mm-hmm.
after, but if you can get to where you've got this passion in a space that you validated, then go for it, because those are the two
Mm-hmm.
things. If you validate, you still might fail, but if you validated it and you know that there's that market, well, then that passion will get you through. And so, and if you're good at it, you got a better chance. I think people look and they're like, I got to be an AI. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
do you know anything about AI? Is it really going to solve that problem? Um,
Right.
so, but this is
All
great.
right.
It was great
Yeah.
helping
Again, thank
people with
you.
all this. So,
Yes. Thank you again for being my guest today.
my
And
pleasure.
to everyone, I'll see you guys next time on Impactors Out Loud. Bye bye.